You were 5. A classroom, a chalkboard, a flag, and a quiet voice that told you, be good, sit still, raise your hand, follow instructions, memorize this. You obeyed. Because that's what good children do. What you didn't realize was that the lesson had already begun. And it wasn't about math or reading or spelling. It was about something much deeper. Control, conformity, silence. For 12 years, you were trained to wait for permission, to never speak out of turn, to absorb what you're told and call. That knowledge, you were never taught to question the rules, only to follow them. And then one day, you woke up, grown, working, obeying a new kind of authority. A boss, a paycheck, a system. Still waiting for permission, Robert Kiyosaki called it out early. He said, school is a lie. It trains you to be poor. And for most people, that sounded absurd. But what if it's true? What if the system isn't broken? What if it's doing exactly what it was designed to do? What if your poverty isn't an accident but a result of following instructions too well? This isn't a conspiracy. This is a quiet truth buried in plain sight. Because the most powerful form of slavery is the one you mistake for freedom. And it all started with a whisper in a classroom. Asterisk, you've been told school is the foundation of progress, the great equalizer, the path to knowledge, success, and freedom. But history tells a different story, one that doesn't begin with philosophers or scientists, but with kings, industrialists, and generals. The modern school system wasn't built to liberate minds. It was built to manage them. In the 19th century, Prussia developed a revolutionary education model. Its goal wasn't to create thinkers. It was to produce soldiers disciplined, obedient, unquestioning. Children were taught to submit to authority, follow schedules, and memorize commands. Efficiency over insight. Order over imagination. This system worked so well, other nations adopted it, including the United States. But something happened in America. The Industrial Revolution exploded. Factories needed workers. The elite needed a workforce docile, punctual, trained to take orders without resistance. And so education was repurposed. Children were placed in rows. Bells marked time. Authority figures stood at the front. And the curriculum, stripped of critical thinking, financial literacy, or individual creativity. Instead, obedience, repetition, and regurgitation. This was not a mistake. John D. Rockefeller, one of the wealthiest men in history, helped fund the General Education Board. He famously said, "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers." Robert Kiyosaki, decades later, would echo this in his own words. They don't teach you to be rich in school because the system needs you to stay dependent. And when you look closely, you begin to see the patterns. Why are we taught to fear failure, to avoid risk, to respect authority without question? Why are children graded for compliance, but never for creativity? Why are we taught to memorize dates, but never question motives? The answer is uncomfortable. Because a society of obedient workers is easier to manage than a society of free minds. And so, the lie was born. A noble disguise, education. But beneath it, a machine built to condition minds into passivity. We tell ourselves it's about opportunity. But opportunity for what? To enter a system where your time is traded for wages, where your debts keep you in line, where your success is measured by how well you follow instructions. This is not education. This is indoctrination. A subtle form of psychological programming engineered not with malice, but with intent. And the most dangerous systems are the ones that convince you they're there to help. So when Robert Kiyosaki refused to accept what school taught him, when he started asking why financial literacy was never discussed, why we're told to work for money instead of letting money work for us, he wasn't rebelling. He was waking up because once you see the school system not as a ladder to freedom, but as the first factory you were ever placed inside, the first place your potential was streamlined, standardized, and sorted, you can never see it the same again. And maybe that's the beginning of real education. Asterisk, imagine spending over a decade in a system that never teaches you how money works. You learn algebra, chemistry, geography, but not what an asset is, not what a liability does, not how debt can enslave you or how wealth is actually built. You're taught how to write a resume, not how to read a balance sheet. Why? Robert Kiyosaki once said, "The school system is designed to produce employees, not entrepreneurs." It sounds radical until you look around. How many people know how taxes really work? How credit is weaponized? How inflation silently robs them every year? We were told that saving money is responsible, that a 401k is security, that homeownership is the American dream. But no one mentioned that saving money in a system built on inflation is a losing game, that most retirement plans are tied to markets we don't control, that the house you live in is often a liability, not an asset. These aren't mistakes, they're narratives. Narratives that keep people dependent, because a person who understands money, real money, is dangerous to the system. They don't need a job. They don't fear debt. They don't obey out of survival. Financial literacy is power, and the system keeps that power to itself. Think about the emotions most people associate with money: fear, anxiety, shame, scarcity, not creativity, not opportunity, not freedom. Why? Because school never taught you that money is a game won with rules, leverage, and players. It taught you to play defense, to be careful, to be grateful for a paycheck. But the wealthy, they play a different game. They use corporations to reduce taxes. They borrow money to make money. They buy assets that generate incomes, so they never have to trade time for it again. And the most unsettling part, you were never invited to learn how to do any of this. Instead, the financial system becomes a kind of invisible prison. You walk in, freely sign your student loans, swipe your credit cards, chase your salary. But once inside, the walls close in. Debt becomes the leash. Bills become the master. Fear becomes the gatekeeper. Kiyosaki called it the rat race. Not because it's demeaning, but because it's endless. No matter how hard you run, you never quite arrive. You wait for a raise. You hope for a promotion. You fear losing your job, and in the background, inflation eats your savings. Taxes take a third of your income. And every financial product marketed to you comes wrapped in shiny terms, but cloaked in fine print. And yet, even with all this pressure, you're told, this is normal. This is adulthood. This is responsibility. But what if it's not? What if the stress, the scarcity, the cycle, it's the product of a system designed to keep you focused on surviving, so you never stop to question who benefits from your struggle? Kiyosaki argues that financial independence starts with one realization. You were programmed to serve money, but you can unlearn it. You can flip the script. You can make money serve you. And it starts not with earning more, but with seeing clearly. Seeing that most schools never taught you how to build wealth because the system doesn't want you independent. It wants you obedient. Think about it. An obedient worker shows up, pays taxes, buys liabilities, follows rules, asks who wrote them. But a financially intelligent person, they ask better questions. They take better risks. They escape the illusion, and that's what makes them free. So the next time someone tells you that school prepared you for life, ask them why you had to learn everything about money after graduation. From books, from YouTube, from trial and error. Why was survival something you had to figure out on your own? Because once you see the omission, you realize it was never just an oversight. It was a strategy. Obedience begins long before you know the word for it. Before you ask why, you've already been taught how to comply. Sit, wait, raise your hand, ask for permission to speak. Follow the rules even if they make no sense. This training is subtle. And by the time you're old enough to question it, it's already your nature. Robert Kiyosaki didn't just challenge economic beliefs, he challenged psychological ones. He said most people aren't poor because of money. They're poor because of obedience. They're afraid to take risks, afraid to fail, afraid to disobey. But where does that fear come from? In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted a now-famous experiment. Ordinary people were told to administer electric shocks to strangers under the supervision of an authority figure. Most did it, even when they thought they were causing pain, even when they heard screams. Why? Because an authority figure told them to. Milgram's conclusion was simple and chilling. People will obey, even against their conscience, when conditioned. By hierarchy. Years later, Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment revealed something darker. Students assigned the roles of guards began to abuse fellow students, playing prisoners within days. Not because they were evil, but because the system made it easy to become obedient and dangerous. When rules are arbitrary and authority unquestioned, human morality fades. Responsibility is outsourced, and people become instruments of control without even knowing it. This is the psychology of the silent majority. Not evil, just conditioned. Conditioned to believe that safety lies in obedience, that punishment awaits those who question. School amplifies this conditioning. Grades become currency. Silence becomes virtue. Success becomes synonymous with compliance. And over time, the fear of doing something wrong becomes greater than the desire to do something real. Kiyosaki rejected this script. He didn't obey the rules of employment, savings, or status. He questioned what most people never dare to. Why are we so afraid to think differently? The answer lies in how obedience protects the ego. It gives people a sense of safety. It says, you're doing what you're supposed to. You're not wrong. You're one of us. To disobey is to become vulnerable, to risk judgment, isolation, failure, and so most people stay quiet. Not because they agree, but because silence feels safer than the truth, even when that silence costs them their freedom. The system doesn't need to burn books to control you. It just needs you to stop asking questions, to doubt your instincts, to fear your own voice, because once you fear disobedience more than oppression, you've already surrendered. And that's the brilliance of the lie. It convinces you that freedom is dangerous, that security is found in submission. But real security doesn't come from obeying the system. It comes from understanding it. Robert Kiyosaki didn't just escape the rat race financially, he escaped it psychologically. Because once you stop needing permission, you start living on your own terms, and that terrifies a system built on quiet compliance. Asterisk, you think your thoughts are your own. You believe your opinions are based on logic, evidence, truth. But what if your mind has been shaped not by reality, but by design? The term manufactured consent was coined by Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He understood something few did at the time, that mass psychology could be engineered, that people could be guided gently, invisibly to believe anything, as long as it felt like their own idea. Governments called it propaganda. Corporations called it public relations. Either way, the goal was the same: control the narrative, control the people. We like to think of media as information, but it's not. It's programming. Not in a metaphorical sense, but in a psychological one. Every headline you scroll past, every ad you ignore, every slogan, every celebrity soundbite, every viral trend, they're not just noise. They're shaping your reality, your sense of normal, your perception of truth. The most dangerous form of control doesn't come with force. It comes with repetition. A lie, repeated enough times, becomes truth. Not because it's true, but because it drowns out alternatives. Robert Kiyosaki warned that the financial education system is absent not by accident, but by strategy. Because if you don't understand money, you rely on those who do. The same is true of information. If you don't know how to think critically, you rely on those who appear to know. And so the media becomes the teacher, the authority, the parent. It tells you who to trust, what to fear, what success looks like, and more importantly, what questions not to ask. Ask yourself this: why is consumer debt normalized? Why is corporate greed celebrated as ambition? Why are billionaires seen as saviors, not monopolists? Because the media is not neutral. It's not a mirror. It's a filter designed by those with power to preserve that power. In 1988, Noam Chomsky outlined this in his book, Manufacturing Consent. He described how the media serves elite interests not by censorship, but by framing. They don't tell you what to think. They tell you what to think about. It's not about fake news. It's about selective truth. What's amplified? What's omitted? What becomes the background noise of modern consciousness? And when the narrative is fear, you become compliant. When the narrative is division, you stop looking upward. When the narrative is consumption, you stay broke. It's no coincidence that financial literacy, media literacy, and critical thinking are all missing from public education. An informed population is unpredictable, unmanageable, unprofitable. But a distracted population, that's gold. So we scroll. We consume. We compare. We argue over headlines written to inflame, not inform. And somewhere beneath all that noise, the truth gets buried. Kiyosaki said, "The rich don't work for money. They make money work for them." But here's the part no one wants to admit. The rich don't consume the same media either. They pay for information. They seek data, strategy, clarity, while the masses consume outrage, fear, and illusion. What you believe about money, power, success, not neutral. It's programmed. You were told a job is security, a house is an asset, retirement is safety. That questioning any of this is irresponsible, even dangerous. But what's really dangerous is obedience without awareness. And awareness begins with asking, who benefits from what I believe? If the answer isn't you, then maybe it's time to rewrite the script. Not with rebellion, but with clarity. Because once you stop consuming the narrative, you start noticing the strings. And when you see the strings, you're no longer the puppet. You're something else entirely. A thinker, a threat, a mind no longer for sale. Most people live in a prison they can't see. Not one of walls or bars, but of beliefs. They work jobs they hate, buy things they don't need, follow rules they never chose. And when they feel the anxiety creeping in, they call it adulthood. As if this slow suffocation is the cost of being responsible. Robert Kiyosaki saw through this early. He saw that the real world was more illusion than truth. A system designed to reward compliance and punish independence. Where financial literacy was deliberately withheld. Where obedience was mistaken for intelligence. Where debt wasn't a mistake, but a mechanism of control. He wasn't just trying to get rich. He was trying to get free, and that's what most people never realize. Rich Dad, Poor Dad wasn't about making millions. It was about breaking chains. Because money isn't just currency, it's control. And when you don't understand how it works, you don't own your time. You don't own your choices. You don't even own your thoughts. You live in a system that rewards the illusion of progress. A raise, a title, a mortgage, but not freedom. Freedom threatens the machine, so how? Do you escape? You begin by seeing the system for what it is. a matrix of mental programs installed in childhood. Reinforced through media, enforced by culture. The program says, go to school, get a degree, get a job, buy a house, stay out of trouble, and when you're too tired to ask why, retire. That's the script, and it works. For everyone except you, because it wasn't written for your benefit. It was written to keep you predictable. But when Kiyosaki met his rich dad, he was introduced to a new idea that wealth is not earned by time. It's created by knowledge, that assets are more important than labor. That risk is not dangerous ignorance, is. And most importantly, that freedom begins in the mind. It was never just about real estate or investing or passive income. Those were the tools. The real weapon was perspective. Most people trade their freedom for comfort. They choose stability over sovereignty. Not because they lack potential, but because they've been taught to fear uncertainty more than captivity. So they stay in the system, they nod along. They repeat the mantras, just be grateful, at least I have a job. This is just the way things are. But gratitude without awareness is just anesthesia. It keeps you quiet. Until the years are gone. To escape the matrix, you don't need to fight it. You need to unplug. Stop measuring your value by titles. Stop mistaking debt for progress. Stop assuming authority equals truth. And start asking real questions. What do I own that makes me money? What knowledge do I have that liberates me? What lies have I accepted just to feel safe? This is what Kiyosaki meant when he said, the richest people in the world build networks. Everyone else is trained to look for work. He wasn't offering advice, he was offering permission. Permission to reject the system, to unlearn the fear, to stop playing a game rigged from the start, because the game only works if you keep playing. But once you step back, once you realize that your time, your labor, your mind have always been the real commodities, you start to see the truth. You were never poor. You were programmed to think you were. And once that illusion breaks, you don't just escape the matrix. You become immune to it, not because you've beaten the system, but because you've stopped needing it. Asterisk. You were told the world is fair, that if you follow the rules, you'll be rewarded. That working hard means success. That obedience equals goodness. That struggle is noble. But what if the rules were never meant for you? What if the system was never broken, just built to serve someone else? Robert Kiyosaki didn't become a voice of financial rebellion by chance. He became one by seeing what most people were too afraid to admit, that the life we were promised was a carefully constructed illusion. A beautiful lie. One that makes you poor in money, yes, but also poor in agency. Poor in critical thought. Poor in courage. It teaches you to fear disobedience. Mute, to internalize failure. To think small. To feel ashamed of wanting more. Because if you ever truly woke up, if you ever saw the strings, you might stop playing your part. You might stop chasing debt. Stop fearing job loss. Stop accepting the narrative that this is just how it is. You might realize you were never meant to be a cog. You were meant to be a creator. But here's the brutal truth. Most people will never break free. Not because they can't, but because the lie is more comfortable than the truth. It's safer to complain than to act. Easier to mock new ideas than to risk change. More convenient to call someone a conspiracy theorist than to confront your own conditioning. So they laugh, they scroll, they obey, and the system keeps turning. But a few wake up. Not all at once, but in moments. Moments of debt that feel like shackles. Moments of burnout that feel like betrayal. Moments of silence that feel like surrender. And in those moments, something cracks. And when it cracks, the truth leaks in. That the school system wasn't education, it was domestication. That the media wasn't informing you, it was soft control. That the job wasn't security, was servitude. That the silence wasn't peace, it was compliance. The lie made you poor because poor people are easier to manage. It made you silent because questioning is contagious. It made you obedient because rebellion, even internal, is dangerous to power. But if you're still here, if you're still watching, still listening, still thinking, then maybe something. Inside, you never died. Maybe your instinct to break free was never fully extinguished. Maybe you never believed the lie in the first place. You just didn't have the words to fight it. Well, now you do. Kiyosaki didn't give the world a get-rich-quick manual. He gave us something far more powerful, a lens, a way to see the matrix. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to read between the lines. You stop waiting for permission. You begin to own your mind, your time, your choices. And that's what makes you dangerous. Not your money, not your titles, not your credentials, your clarity. So now the question becomes, what will you do with it? You can go back. Pretend this was just another video, another fleeting idea. Or you can decide right now that the lie ends with you, that you will not be poor in purpose. You will not be silent in truth. And you will never again be obedient to fear. Because freedom isn't given, it's taken. And it begins not with money, but with a mind no longer willing to be bought.